I think my sister was Buzz Lightyear. My sister's best friend, Jolene, was Woody. I was Forky. And sometimes I get assigned the costume and sometimes I choose it. I think this was one of those like moments where they were like, you should be Forky. And I was like, that is perfect. I definitely want to.
Alrighty. Caitlin Antonios is a California native and freelance journalist. She covers inequity, She covers health inequity and disability rights. She's always on the hunt for the best Lebanese food, even though she says nothing beats her mother's. And she likes to deep dive the Lord of the Rings wiki page. And, Caitlin, maybe this is a little unfair to ask you, but you shared with me that this was much, quote, harder to write than you expected. Can you explain why so?
Yeah, I mean, I have to write like when you're applying. So I'm applying for jobs right now, and it's very much in my mind that I have to kind of present myself, with a bow tie in a way that's appealing to whoever I'm applying to. So I've written like a bunch of cover letters recently, and so I'm constantly kind of spewing out the same stuff. And so when I was trying to think like, okay, what's a bio for this type of conversation, where it's fairly free form and it's really not like, people are coming in hopefully to just hear us talk and hear us chat and like get a little snippet of what we're like in an hour. And I was just trying to think like, how do I package that? And so I did like half professional, half not, half personal, I guess. That was my approach, but it was really hard because, there's a million things that I could have put for both of those sort of categories. I just happened to pick those because they felt the most immediate.
Is there one thing in particular that you knew needed to be in this bio?
I guess I was trying to find a way to say that I'm Lebanese without just being like, she's Lebanese. So food was a good segue.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I felt like that needed to be in it because that does really shape who I am. So that I guess was like a necessity. And then I wanted to put in Lord of the Rings because it is something that I love. And obviously how we met, as
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned. And I feel like, I don't know, maybe this is like a poor like worldview, but sometimes I feel like I can really like if I know somebody likes something that I like, not a lot has to matter about their personality. Like I can just be friends with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm from California. I'm from Southern California, so Comic-Con is huge in my area. I'm very close to it. I go to the convention. Pre-COVID, I went for like 5 years straight. And my sister's gone for longer than that. So we're like a very sort of like pop culture, sort of nerdy family. And we have a lot of friends who have similar interests that we've met online because of those similar interests. So I feel like if I can kind of identify sort of like a fandom that I'm part of or, a piece of work that, whether it be art or literature or whatever, or music, it can just bring people together in like a very sort of streamlined way.
Yeah. It might have been just, your word choice might have been just for brevity purposes, but you said go to Comic-Con. From what you've shared with me about your trips to Comic-Con, it's not just I show up and go. This is a calculated plan, one with steps, costumes, expectations. Can you explain what I'm sharing right now?
Yeah, it's hard to describe how seriously we take Comic-Con. We go for all 4 days. So I don't know how much people know about Comic-Con, but like quick recap is 4 days at the San Diego Convention Center, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then there's a preview night on Wednesday, which we usually don't go to. But it's like a preview night where people can kind of sneak around, see what's sort of out there, and then plan their weekend accordingly. So every there's it's a conference center, so there's multiple rooms that have multiple schedulings, and that gets released beforehand. So, we kind of just like, we literally plan like minute to minute because it's such a massive thing and like 300,000 people are there. And now talking about it, it's like crazy to think about because I'm like,
Yeah. How
even though
many
I'm lucky
people?
to be vaccinated, I'm like, I don't know if I ever want to be around 300,000 people again. But that's a separate thing. But yeah, so there's so many people there and there's so many things that you want to do or, you know, an attendee can do that you kind of have to plan it or else you end up like wasting your weekend. And once you go a couple times and once you meet people who have gone for years and years and years, you can sort of like know how to do it in a way that most maximizes your time there.
You
So
min-max it.
that's like a
Yeah.
big, yeah, that's a big planning portion. We also do, I mean, I go with my sister and my sister's best friend, who's like a second sister to me. And we usually have another friend or two, you know, all get a hotel together. We wake up at 5 a.m., we go stand in line overnight, whatever it is.
You
But
get
yeah,
into
so we usually
cosplay as
do,
well, from you've
yeah,
shared
we
with
do
me.
themed costumes. Yeah. We usually don't do something like super complicated. Like some people do like, you know, 10 hours of makeup. We don't really do makeup heavy costumes. We just try to find clothing that fits and we pick a theme. So like I don't even remember what our last theme was because it's hard to think back like because it's skipped a year.
I remember
I
you
think
showing me Forky was a very
oh
strong
yes.
cosplay.
Yeah, that might have been the most recent time that we went was we all did Toy Story. So my sister was Buzz Lightyear. No, my sister was, oh man, I'm so bad at this. I can't remember anything. I think my sister was Buzz Lightyear. My sister's best friend, Jolene, was Woody. I was Forky. And sometimes I get assigned the costume and sometimes I choose it. I think this was one of those like moments where they were like, you should be Forky. And I was like, that is perfect. I definitely want to.
Wait, how did that make you
Um,
feel? What is being like chosen to be Forky mean?
I don't know, but it felt right. So I
Yeah,
wasn't offended.
I'm
It
trash.
felt yeah, it felt right. So I was like, okay, I think also I was very willing to do it like I had the blue
Hmm.
eyebrows and I had the or was it blue lipstick and red eyebrows maybe? I did the makeup sort of and then the dress was literally just like a white tube dress that I could barely walk in and I was in it all day and then I just had a red cardigan for his red arms. So I also liked it because it was pretty simple, but
Hmm.
like people could tell, you know,
Yeah,
especially next to Woody, like people could tell what it
the
was.
squad.
So yeah, we've done that. We've done Jurassic Park. We've done Riverdale. I've never done a Lord of the Rings one, but mainly because I just don't know how to pull it off. Like I've thought about doing Arwen, but I'm like, I'm like a tiny person in real life. So I feel like elves tend to be like tall and
Mm.
very like graceful, which also I don't know that I would describe myself
Oh
that way.
yeah,
I could be a hobbit, but like, eh.
yeah. I feel
So
you.
I don't know. But Lord of the Rings is on the bucket list. I do have to do it. I just haven't yet because it needs like a lot of thought.
Cosplay is one of those things that um, I find there's a lot of it's like community, right? It was one of those things what I'm thinking about right now is all of the videos of folks showing up in similar costumes or costumes that are partners to somebody else's costumes, and these are strangers sometimes, right? These are strangers that are showing up and saying, "Hey, I identify with the thing that you're wearing. What do you think of mine?" Right? And I think it touches on what you were just speaking about earlier, which is like if you can find that kind of common interest, it's much easier to connect with someone, right? And I think that's so fantastic about some of these spaces is that it's like people are looking for connection sometimes, right? It's like we all share this together, let's all meet up. And it's you kind of bypass all of the traditional social like hey, how are you? Hello. I know that might sound like people just kind of walk up to you, but I can imagine it's like I know it's going to sound interesting. It's like I know you, and what they're referring to is the character, right? But when they're saying that, what I feel is like I know you, um, like I know what you're interested in, right? You're here with me. I know the person that you might be. Um, what kind of community did you find in Comic Con?
Exactly that. I mean, I think that's really what it is. I always like when I started going, my sister's older than me, so I'm the baby of the family, and so she's always kind of been able to go to this stuff before my parents felt comfortable letting me go. But even when they let me go, I don't know, for the first time, I mean, I was a teenager. Like, I definitely wasn't 18 or whatever it is. And I remember they were so, so hesitant. And my sister was like, don't worry. Like, these are spaces where it's going to be okay. Like, and it's very true. I don't know if it's like, because everyone there just kind of has the same goal, which is, you know, just to have a really good weekend, and everyone wants everyone else to have a really good weekend, and it's so hard to get tickets that it really filters out people who might not have the best intentions. But like I've gotten lost there like a million times. I'll go to the bathroom and can't find my sibling in place, and all I have to do is grab the nearest person and be like, can you help me? And it's like everyone drops what they're doing, they're like, yes, let's help you.
Oh, that's
And I
awesome.
think that's just so special about Comic-Con. I mean, I love it so much, and it has such a special place in my heart because it really, and I gain a lot of confidence in those weekends, especially because, I mean, believe it or not, I'm quite introverted and I don't really like talking to strangers. But those are places where it feels very safe to do so,
Hmm.
because you're like, okay, this person likes something that I like, and that thing is wonderful in my eyes. So then they kind of must be wonderful too, or at least they have good taste.
Yeah, yeah.
So that creates that sort of like, I don't know, for me, it's a sense of safety. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I guess what I'm getting at is that it's like you're guaranteed to just connect with strangers. And whether it's because you're in line for, I don't know, sometimes as many as like 8 hours overnight, and you're like
Oh,
kind of
geez.
dehydrated. Like the amount of times that people have just walked around the lines and been like, hey, I have extra water. Anyone who's dehydrated,
Yeah,
take
yeah,
some.
yeah.
Like that kind of stuff. It's just such a like, I don't know, it's just so special. It's like
I think
I don't
about
really
when I hear
find
is
that.
like when I'm reflecting on is like my experiences at music festivals. Maybe the only difference there is that like there might be some substances that make people more willing to befriend each other, but like, not always, right? And I think it's that similar shared sense of community in these spaces, right? And maybe when I'm very curious to hear a little bit more, your I guess a little bit more clarity on is why does it feel safe when these strangers are just dressed as Spider-Man, right? Versus like if you
Yeah.
had a Spider-Man shirt maybe in the mall, right? Would you feel the same kind of safety? Can you speak to why you feel like that might be a quote safe place?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how to describe it. And it's like, I don't want to like give the wrong impression that like people shouldn't still be safe and conscious, especially if you have valuables. Like, it's not like one of those like utopias or it's
Yeah.
like nothing bad ever happens here. And there's a big sort of debate in sort of that world about, you know, women who choose to cosplay and reveal a lot of skill. And what does that mean for when a guy comes to take a photo with them? Like, does
Mm.
that mean they can put their arm around them? Doesn't mean so there's all those discussions happening. I think for me though, um, it's like I don't really know how to describe it. I think for me, it's like I have never had an experience where I've ever felt uncomfortable. Um, and when I was younger, I was just very like I was like I was just always a very nervous child. And so when I started going to these, I would like stick to my sister, like literally would not let her walk 2 feet in front of me because I was so scared of this ginormous crowd. And then with age and then also just sort of testing it out a little bit, I found myself getting a lot more confidence, being able to like confidently go up to a security guard and be like, hey, I need help right now, which I don't know where I would have learned that otherwise. Um, it certainly wasn't like that at like amusement parks.
Hmm.
Like I said, I live in Orange County, so I could go to Disneyland, but Disneyland, up until like college was still terrifying to me. So I don't know what it is about Comic Con,
Yeah.
or but I think it is just like, the people who go there. I think the culture of Comic Con, and again, this is just my experience, the culture of Comic Con is really like, we just want everyone to have a good, safe weekend. And so and it is very family oriented. Like people bring their kids, like little kids,
Hmm.
like toddlers, with them all day and are in line and people are entertaining them. And, so it is, there's like parties in the evenings and that's
Yeah,
kind of a
yeah,
separate thing. I just sort of mean like, if I get lost to the bathroom, it feels safe to just go up to a random person and be like, hey, can you help me get back to this place?
yeah,
Um, and, and I think also because we all feel that same way, like if somebody came up to us, we would try to help them. And so everyone's there to just kind of help everyone have a good time.
yeah. What
Um,
I feel too is that like that is there outside of Comic Con, right? Like I maybe I'm assuming too much here, but if someone were to come to you, Caitlin, and say, "Hey, I'm lost in this mall. Can you help me?" My assumption is that you would be, ready to help them, whether they're, like I said, dressed as Spider-Man or not. Maybe if they're just as Spider-Man in the mall, it might be a little bit different. But like, my point being is that like, it's interesting that like this safe space or what's being cultivated as a safe space is shared around community, and it's unspoken. What it seems, right, is like we're here and this is quote the vibe, right? Like we're good with this. And maybe there's not a question here, but I'm so curious on like how can we take that out of Comic-Con? Like what is it that how can you present yourself that like you're okay to approach me, right? We're okay to have these kind of conversations, like and I think about it, maybe it is the same bridge that connected you and I, but it's like you felt comfortable to some extent speaking to a stranger who you just met on, and literally like, let's talk about this fact that you and I have never met in person, right? We were just talking about this, right? Like here you are speaking on my broadcast in front of, a few folks, and is like, you are so game, but like we haven't met in person, right? And it's just, I think, a testament to the fact that like these connections can be made, I think, outside of these like Comic-Con like spaces. Like what is it that bridges, obviously it was Lord of the Rings here and then we got into conversation, right? But it's like, how do we have these kind of connections with folks otherwise? Like how do we make ourselves accessible to folks otherwise? No real question there, but I think it's just a thought around like how do you make human connection way more accessible, right? It's how do you demonstrate that, right? Because I feel like it's the same. It's folks sometimes get in their own heads like, I can't approach this person. There's a list of things that are gonna go in your mind that like it's the way I imagine maybe you at your first Comic-Con, right? It's like, oh, there's all of these people here. I only know my sister, so I have to stay with her, right? And I can maybe understand that what got you comfortable beyond that is showing up and knowing that the confidence, right? You were there and you made it out, right? I guess I'm trying to think of like, what does this look like when you remove those shared interests? Is it required? Do you think it's required for you to connect with people like that?
I don't think so, but I think for me, it's like when I go up to somebody in full costume, like I know that it's not just like I know there's an element of dedication, and I know that for them nothing is more important than like seeing whatever they want to see at Comic-Con that weekend. So I don't have to worry like what are their motivations?
Mm,
Like, you know, are they going to lead me astray? It's like, no, they don't want to lead me astray because they want to focus 100% on whatever they're trying to get to.
yeah,
And
yeah,
if they
makes
can help me
sense.
on the way, they will. But like for the most part, they're like tunnel vision. And it's like, we're the same way. And I think everyone there is kind of the same way. And again, because tickets are so hard to get, it filters out people who are, you know, maybe they're with bad intentions or whatever it is, or like doesn't really care, or just kind of wants to
Want to be
see
there? Yeah,
women in costume or like whatever
yeah,
it is. Like, they can do that outside, but in the actual convention center, everyone there has to have a ticket. And then also is very well, like you see security guards all over
yeah.
the
Maybe
place.
that
So
could be too. Is like the
there's that element
yeah,
too. But I think just the people, it's like, yeah, they care very much about what they are there to see, and they don't want to ruin it for anyone else, and they don't want it ruined for them. So it's kind of like treat everyone how you want to be
yeah,
treated. And people really stick to that mentality, I think, pretty consistently all weekend. Of course, there's like some issues, but for the most part, from what I've witnessed, at least during the daytime, it's very much just like, everyone just wants to have a good
they're
time. So
vibing.
let's
Yeah,
just yeah, keep it that way.
When I think about it too, maybe and maybe excuse me, this is like a judgment call, and people might feel judged by this thought. I want to share it anyway, but it's folks that would frequent Comic Con. Making assumption here are also folks that sometimes might, it's what I'm imagining is like myself is nerds. It's like folks that are like into quote nerdy things, and with that same assumption in mind is sometimes that same community of folks has a difficulty approaching people outside of these spaces, right? Just befriending folks and making friends sometimes, right? And that's what I hear is like, oh, I went to Comic-Con and I made all of my friends, right? And like I maintained relationships there, right? And maybe it is, once again, just this collection of liked interests. And like you've pointed out, like there's the purpose there. It's very clear why we're here. We're here to enjoy this, right? But the same goes without saying that like folks are still the same people in costume or not, right? But it's what I guess I'm looking at is that why it's so much easier to connect with folks, right? And maybe it's the same idea of why like you make friends in clubs or you join sports teams, right? It's very clear of like why we're here, what we all like, and then the in is very easy.
Yeah.
And then the maintaining is like, well, hey, we're gonna show up to the same movies, or hey, let's watch the same TV show together, right? Is like almost handed you a way to maintain friendships and subject matter to talk about, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think there's a desire there. Like I've met plenty of people who are like, oh, who are you here with this weekend? They're like, no, I'm just here by myself. Just, I've just been talking to people I don't know all weekend and
Yeah,
meeting
yeah.
friends and exchange numbers. And so I think there's a desire that weekend. It's like when you love something, you want to talk to somebody about it who also loves it. So you can just talk about it.
Yeah.
And that may not necessarily happen at the mall or, even at the beach or, wherever. Like there are times when, again, like I consider myself a very introverted person, but I know Comic Con weekend, I'm going to be talking all over the
Yeah,
place to
yeah,
everyone I
yeah.
can about whatever it is that we're going to see and getting excited. And that's like our weekend to do so. And so, especially, when I was going, I was pretty much in school and like sometimes working over the summer, but not since I've sort of entered the professional world. And like me and my sister keep talking about like, oh my gosh, that is going to be such a nice weekend to just get away from the work world. And she always used to say that because she's been working much longer than I have. She's older than me. But I feel like a lot of people feel that way. It's like, you don't have to worry about like nobody even checks their phone unless they're checking like line times and different sorts of conventions.
Yeah.
Nobody's worrying about work. Nobody wants to think about it. I don't talk to anybody. Like, I don't really know much about the people that I meet. I don't know much about their personal lives. I'm not like, oh, so what do you do for work?
Yeah,
It's like, we
yeah.
don't care. We just want to talk about why you're here, what you're looking to see, and, what snippets you're hoping to
Hmm.
get in terms of like, you know, merchandise you want to buy or whatever.
That makes that makes me
Yeah.
think of something else that you've mentioned, to segue into like escapism, right? You had mentioned to me that you had picked up Lord of the Rings again during pandemic because you needed that escape. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always, so I used to hate reading when I was like in elementary school. And then in fourth grade, uh, I had a teacher whose like goal it was to make every student love to read. And his philosophy was you just need to find the right book for you.
What was his
And
name?
so
What was that teacher's name?
Mr. Bloomingdale.
Mr.
I don't
Bloomingdale?
remember. Yeah, his last name was
Okay. Well,
Bloomingdale.
shout out to Mr. Bloomingdale is what
Yeah,
I'll
I
ask.
know. I've actually tried to reach out to him to let him know like that was a really pivotal year, that fourth grade year, because I really did fall in love with reading. And I don't know if I got his email wrong. I never heard back, but I did try to reach out to him. But anyway, so he was the type where he was like, if you don't like it after the first 50 pages, just chuck it out and start a new one, which I had never really done before. So in fourth grade, like I just spent, weeks and days trying to find a book I liked, and I didn't really come across one until Series of Unfortunate Events, which I just devoured that series. And it was wonderful. And I still have all the books in like a big, nice set on top of my desk.
Very nice.
Um, so So yeah, those were, I kind of think, my first sort of, I mean, it's not really, I guess it's fantasy. Well, I don't know what it's
Yeah.
considered. I mean, there's a fantastical element
Yeah.
to it. So those were my first books, and yeah, those just like took me out of my day. And it was the first experience I ever had where, I'd start reading when I come home from school at like 4, I wouldn't have any homework to do or whatever. And then suddenly my mom would be like, okay, bedtime, it's 9 o'clock, you gotta go to bed. And I was like, what? Like, what is
What is
time?
like
What is that?
it's
What is
dark.
going
Yeah. Where did
on?
I go?
This is, yeah, exactly. It was like shocking to
Yeah.
me. Um, and I don't know how often, like what age that typically happens. Maybe fourth grade is late blooming. I don't know, but that was like the first time that ever happened to me. So I just I almost felt like a life hack where I was like, oh, I can just get through my day like paying attention to somebody else, and then suddenly it's bedtime and I get to do it all over again the next day. And so it really felt like a life hack, and then I kind of lost that because I just got so busy with school and work and whatever. But then when the pandemic happened, that was like I was living alone in New York,
Mm.
um, which was a whole other thing. But but yeah, that was really intense. My roommate left because she was Canadian, or she is Canadian. Um, but she was just, like, okay, I'm from Canada. I'm gonna go back there. I have my healthcare there. I'm not gonna
Shout out to
be in New
Canada.
York.
Brag.
Yeah, exactly. So she left like in like end of February, maybe, or no, maybe beginning of March. I don't know. But like March, April, May, June, I was all just, you know, pretty much trying to figure it out. Um, and yeah, Lord of the Rings, I remembered, I was like, oh yeah, this is a life hack. And what is more sort of engaging and exciting and captivating than Lord of the Rings? So I picked it up again, and I was so glad that I did, because it sort of reignited my love for that story. And yeah, it was just one of those things that it was a great way to pass time.
The escapist, like, I guess, hobbies, right? My personal method of, I guess, quote, escape is, I guess, RPGs or role playing games, right? On one particular Skyrim, and I get a lot of grief from my friends because I'm always playing Skyrim. I don't know if you're familiar, but it's creating a character, envisioning being a part of a world, and it is that such miraculous moment where you're like, you realize that you weren't where you are, right? It's I think so amazing that what you're, not sound like odd or anything, but it's like what you're literally doing is looking at characters on a piece of paper, right? Like drawings essentially, right? Yet your mind is processing this in a way and creating such vivid imaginations that it's putting you somewhere, right? And the fact that it almost has certain kind of like, I guess, healing properties in that, right? Is like here, and I can imagine, and maybe you can add some color to this, is like, I imagine, like you said, you're alone in New York. You're experiencing some very scary stuff, especially being where you are. There's, I'm sure, a lot of ambulances. Like the way pandemic was working is like, what is going on outside? Yet, like, when we read these words, it really like propels us into this world, right? And I'm unsure of like how that is like what is the health benefits of this, like, because I'm sure there is, right? There's a way in which you look at these things and you say, hey, like, I can be somewhere else for a moment. It's almost like the way I see it is going to sound maybe odd, but it's like the same reason I can understand certain people take substances, right? It's like a controlled thing, right? Is like, my understanding sometimes when you take substances is that like you can certify a certain set of feelings, right? When I take this thing, it will make me feel differently than what I am feeling already, right? So the control there being is that you can control maybe how you're experiencing the world, right? But that's done naturally through these escapist ventures, right? And it's also very easy to access, right? You got to open a book, and all you got to know, I mean, not all, but we got to know is how to read the words and understand the situation, right? And in that, I feel like that also ties into what we're talking about Comic-Con, right? Is like that escapist, that like it's somewhere different, and how easy it is to maybe create these kind of spaces for people. I guess the thought there is, can can you remember maybe how it felt reading Lord of the Rings in this time? Like what it is that you're saying, like why did you like let me maybe paint a backdrop, right? You like you just said, you're alone in New York City, maybe that you're only familiar with for a brief amount of time. Um and that is what you've turned to. You know what I mean? Like you could have turned to so many other things, and I'm sure you did as well. Maybe not Lord of the Rings, so you're only saving grace, but like the point still stands is that you turned to Lord of the Rings as a priority, right? Can you explain maybe why you think you did?
I think one, the fact that I had already read it and I know those movies like ridiculously well. That there is, I'm one of those people who really like, it's funny because I think I'm much more like my dad. My dad really likes to know the ending. He doesn't care if you spoil a plot. Like he doesn't even think of it as spoiling. Like he's one of those people who will watch the same thing over and over again. My mom's the opposite. She's like a one and done. Even if she loves it, even if she loved it, she's like, I already saw it. Why do I need to see it again? I
Check.
think I'm like a mix in the sense that I don't like spoilers, but I love watching stuff that I love over and over again. Like there was a period where I kid you not, I watched Pride and Prejudice, the 2015 Keira Knightley version, every single day for like 2 weeks straight. And there was no reason. It's just one night I watched it and and it like lifted my mood so much that I was like, okay, I'm going to do this again tomorrow. And I did.
Just hits
And I
differently.
kept doing
Yeah.
it until it stopped working. So I don't know if it's like an addictive personality or where that stems from. I have no idea. But with Lord of the Rings, it's like, okay, I already knew it pretty well. And but I knew the movies more than I knew the books. Well, I don't know if that's actually true. Maybe I'm not giving myself enough credit. But I had definitely seen the movies more times than I had read the books. And so I knew that there was still going to be like some element of, oh yeah, I forgot that this happened, or I forgot this character even existed. That was going to be like a pleasant surprise to keep me engaged. But I also knew, okay, this is something that I know very well. This is something I know I like,
Mm-hmm.
and something that I can always sort of keep myself entertained with. And it will evoke sort of the same emotions of happiness or
Yeah,
intrigue
yeah.
or excitement or even suspense. Sometimes I still feel it. So yeah, I think it's just, it has been a go-to for me. And then um it was also one of the few things that I decided to take actually with me to New York, because I didn't want to take my whole library with me. So I picked a few things that I was like, okay, I'm gonna want to read these
Yeah,
at
yeah,
some point.
yeah.
So it was convenience in that sense too, because I still do like reading like actual books. Although I'm not against electronic books. I know there's a debate about that. How do you feel about that? Because you do ebooks, don't you?
I consume the literature in from literally like this week. I ran to Lord of the Rings, then read it in my paperback version in the same chapter, and then finished it off in bed with an electronic book. Right? I just think it's accessibility. Right? The experiences are obviously very different, but I am not one to argue. I think it's very circumstantial. But I think what I just want to point out here, how I think amazing it is, like you made a very deliberate decision to pick this book, right? You're like, I can only bring so many things. This is my choice, right? This is important to me. And I'm going to go back to what I was just saying. It was like, because of what I heard and what you said is like, when I read this, it's going to feel a type of way. It's going to be familiar. It's going to be suspenseful. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be scary, right? It's going to be feelings, right? And it's like what I was saying with certain substances. This is like, when I use this thing, I'm going to feel a type of way, right? Which is very powerful because it's like what you turn to, right? It's like, because I don't want to feel sad anymore. I don't want to feel scared of the pandemic anymore. So I'm going to open this book, right? And I think it's so powerful how these escapist outlets can do that for us, right? Like someone in chat writes, I jump into Skyrim and all the problems go away for a little, right? But like, what is that? Like, what are we doing? We're looking at, like I said, drawings on a page or pixels on a screen, right? But our mind straight up transports us to these spaces and we feel differently, right? That's so
Yeah.
huge, something that we can't quote control. We try our best because like we were just saying, well, I'm going to open this book and I'm going to try to control my feelings by like, I guess, guiding them, right? I just think it's so fascinating because it's so real. It's so like, wow, I just drained 2 hours in this, right? The sun is down and I don't even know I was somewhere else, but where I was is in my bed or in my chair or whatever it is. Yeah, that's always been the case for me. It was like how powerful it is, and it just kind of shows you how powerful your mind is, and that's in these ways, right? Like it can remove where you are, right? Yeah, and also someone says in chat, the quality of the Lord of the Rings makes it possible, right? The density of it, right? The lore that's just endless and almost a I think calling of pride that you can like name all the Valar or whatever, like or just have a
Yeah.
deep understanding of how these things were made. Part of that community, right? Culture and connecting with
Yeah.
people.
I do gotta say one aspect of this, and I just feel like it's relevant because we've been talking about kind of nerdy stuff,
Yeah.
is fan fiction, which I was super into.
Yeah.
And I say was like loosely. I don't I like I mean I don't have time to like really think or read fan fiction right now, but I'm like I could totally see myself wanting to read fan fiction in the future because it's like you just want more, like you crave more material. Um, but that I mean for me when I was like middle school to mid high school, like that was all I was reading. Like I wasn't even reading real books anymore. I mean, not that fan fiction isn't real books, but you know what I mean? Like I wasn't reading like aside from stuff I had to read for school, I wasn't
Yeah.
like just picking up books in my free time and reading, but I was reading a lot. It just was fan fiction and I was so into it. And like I kind of joke about it now because it's like a little embarrassing and it's like kind of still got a stigma around it.
Why though?
Um,
Why? Because the author didn't write it?
no, because I think
Because the L.
teenage
James
girls love
is.
it. Sometimes people like to criticize what teenage girls like as frivolous.
Mm,
So I think that's a part of it. And I mean, there, some of it's very well written, some of them's really not well written, like at all. So I think it's an easy target to make fun of. But yeah, I mean, I used to be super embarrassed about it, but I bring it up now because it's like it really is a part of like I think it made me a better reader for sure because then I started being like, okay, so this is the kind of the style that I write like, and this is what engages me. This type of writing engages me, and it's
mm-hmm.
always very detailed. And I think it also just it made me like kind of a better editor in my head because I would be like, I'd read a line and be like, I'm not sure that that's actually the right tense for that. So I think it did like kind of challenge my sort of editing and writing abilities. And I never wrote it. I mean, I think I tried maybe, but I definitely never posted anything anywhere. And I don't think I ever really got into writing it. But I definitely was into reading it. And I just
What
feel like I
is
had
what
to
is the fan fiction that you'd want to create for yourself? Where are you going?
I don't know. I was never a huge, you know what? I was never a huge fan of the ones that like are okay. So this is like getting really deep into like fan fiction lore, but I think they're referred to as like reader inserts. And so it's like it's written in the second person where it's like you fall into the story. I was never really
Oh,
into
like
the
you like the reader, like the author.
yeah, like the reader
It's
is now
like if
inserted
Caitlin was
in the
in
story.
um
Yeah. Yes.
series of unfortunate events. Okay. Yeah,
Oh my
that'd be
God, yeah.
great.
Okay, so I was never a fan of those. No, like hate to those people who love them or read them, but I was never into that. I was actually never even into new characters. Like sometimes people would write in like new characters, and that's because they wanted to like, be a love interest with
Mm-hmm.
like somebody they loved in the show or the movie or whatever. Which is also fine. I mean, you know,
I mean, talk
to
about
each their
escapism, right? Like
yeah,
fuck,
well,
I'm gonna be
exactly.
right in
Each
this.
their own.
Yeah.
Right. I kind of more like I like the continuations because the only reason that I started going to fan fiction is because I was like, oh, I want more of this. And that started with Twilight. I was big. I mean, I'm sure people can guess. I was really into Twilight, of
Mm.
course. And I'm still into Twilight, honestly. Like if I see it on TV, I'll still watch it.
Well, Steph
Um,
right now is reading the is it Blood Moon? Is it the
New
the
Moon, the
n-
second one.
no, the story as told by Edward.
Oh, Midnight Sun.
Midnight Sun. Every day she like pulls out this thick tome, and she's like, "I've gotten through some today as like a triumph. Like I've done it." And like
It
every
was
day she's like, "Check how
good.
big it is."
It was good, except you know what? That book, she was a little too self-aware. She mentions Comic-Con in it, and it just took me out of it. I was
Wait,
like, ew, why'd she do that?
Bella does?
No, like in in Midnight Sun, at one point, I don't remember who the characters were. I read it in like a day that it came out. But they mentioned Comic-Con, and it was like too self-aware for me. I was like, oh, it took me out of it.
Well, that's
And
too
I
like
kind
talk
of
about
cringed a
wait.
little bit. I had to put it down. I was like, oh, this is cringy now.
Can you explain that? Because here, let me set this up. It's like we're
Okay.
going to this place for escapism, right? I'm gonna
Yeah.
be here. Yet all of a sudden, something that I'm familiar with, something from my real life that I love, is mentioned in the book that I also love, and your reaction is cringing.
Yeah, okay, hold on. I really want to see if I can find the quote. I'm not being rude. I'm literally just looking
Yeah, go ahead.
exactly what I'm talking about. Because I want to see if I can find the quote, and then maybe I can better explain why I hated it. But
Yeah, take your
but I
time. No
don't know
worries.
if somebody I don't know if somebody's posted it on Goodreads. I doubt that that's the one that they chose to do. Wait, let me see. I think I have it on Kindle. Can you search for book like
Yeah, you can search for words.
lines?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, hold on. Okay, so while I look for this, remind me of your question. Like why
So
was
the
it
question
so cringy?
was, I was just, I guess, confused is maybe a way to describe how I feel about the fact that you're going to a place. It's a combination of a place you love in a story that you love, and your reaction was cringing, right? I just kind of need an
Right.
explanation on why that is, because I would imagine it's like, oh wow, like I'm escaping into some. I maybe have my own assumptions. Or did you find it?
Yes, I found
Okay,
it.
go ahead.
Keep going though. I'm listening.
Well, it's just with that thought. It was like I said, there's something that you love in something that you love, and yet the reaction was completely the opposite.
Okay. I'm rereading it and
You
again, and
can't
it's
even.
making me cringe. I'm like getting flushed because I hate it so much. Okay, here's why it when I say it's become too self-aware, this is what I mean. It like if she had written this when it was supposed to come out, which was years and years ago before it got leaked, this wouldn't have been in it. Like I just know that. She would not have included Comic-Con in it. And it's like I read these when I was in like fifth or sixth grade, and Comic-Con didn't exist then, and it wasn't on anyone's radar. And yes, it did get big. The first movie, the cast had a panel at Comic-Con and whatever. But it's like I just know that it just doesn't feel genuine to me. It's like this isn't what I signed up for. So okay, here's the here's the quote. Okay, wait. So he goes, I have to like remind myself of what scene they were in. I think they were just like Edward is because he can read minds. So he's listening in with his like super vampire hearing to Bella and her group of friends talking. And so I don't
Bella's
know.
Kristen Stewart, by the
Mike
way.
asked, huh?
I'm just reminding people. Bella is Edward
Oh, yeah.
is Robert Pattinson in the movie, and Kristen Stewart is Bella. Just if you folks don't know.
Yeah. So, okay, this is just half a sentence, but it goes Eric enthusiastically named Comic-Con as the place where he would, like, his dream destination, and the table erupted in laughter. What a dork, Lauren hissed. Okay, so one, she uses hissed way too much, which is like Stephanie Meyer's thing.
A very
it's
typical
like,
human reaction to things.
yeah, hissed?
Yeah.
What? Also, I don't know, it makes me cringe. And it's like, I get that character, I mean, she said he was nerdy in the first one and whatever, it's supposed to be like, but it's just, I don't know. It just doesn't feel genuine.
I make an assumption here
I
to
feel like
think that it's like, go ahead.
No, maybe you can explain it better because I can't totally
It's no
explain
longer
why
an
it bothered
escape.
me.
It's not a place that I can imagine it being the same cringe as like when you're including when it's too on the nose, right? When they're too self-aware of these kind of things, right? Because it removes you as like you said, they wouldn't talk about Comic-Con here. Like maybe it wouldn't be, but I mean, maybe it's along with the character, like, oh, he's a dorky character, so we're gonna say he's involved in dorky things. But my assumption here is that it brought you back, right? It like brought you out of an escape, and is like it. Your mind is like Comic-Con. That's not in the world of Twilight, right?
Yeah.
You didn't expect it to be.
Yeah, I think it was like a very clear like nod to fans, which, you know, like a lot of shows do that, and a lot of like oh my gosh, what's that show? Um Supernatural.
Mm,
The one that's been on for like a zillion years, the two
yeah.
brothers, they're like fighting demons and stuff. They do a whole episode kind of spoofing Comic-Con, but it's like a nod to fans. And to me, that's not like I didn't find that particularly. I mean, I find that show on some level to be a little bit cringy, but I quite enjoyed it for the first like 2 seasons before it went on for like a million. But for me, the difference there is that it's like from the ground up, that show was very heavily involved with Comic-Con
Mm-hmm.
and their fan base and conventions in general, and they created their own convention. And so it's like it fans were like in on that joke. This was like a nod to fans, but it just felt, I don't know. For me, it felt flat. Maybe some
Yeah, it's
people loved
forced.
it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I just remember thinking like,
Yikes.
I had a very visceral reaction to it. And I like literally had to put it down because I was like,
Yeah.
ugh, I hate
Yeah,
this.
what I think about here is, have you seen Endgame? I think it's an
Yes.
Endgame or Infinity Wars. I can't remember what the scene is. I think it's an Endgame. But when they play Fortnite, there's a scene in which
You
Thor
know,
is
Fortnite,
playing
maybe I didn't even pick it up, but
Thor is playing Fortnite, and it's a whole thing because at the time Fortnite was featuring Marvel characters, so it was like this crossover, and that's the difference. Is like, is this a crossover or is this just someone pointing out in the chat a forced lull, like a forced lull, like
yeah.
head nod, but also like back up, like we're not doing this.
Yeah, it just felt so unnecessary
Yeah.
too. It's like it doesn't add anything to the story, it doesn't add anything to the characters. It just, yeah, I don't know.
Rotten
I
Easter
I
egg,
would,
yeah, someone says. Um,
yeah,
so maybe to shift gears a little bit here. When you're talking about reading fan fiction and this idea of it making you a better editor, um, I'm very curious on why you've decided to pursue what I would call professional writing, right? As journalism, right? Or in the way that you report stories. Do you want to talk a little bit about, what kind of reporting you do, as well as maybe why it's important for you to talk about these topics?
sure. So in addition to my glamorous life as a nerd, I enjoy and am pursuing a professional career in journalism. Um, I focus a lot on health journalism and inequity because that's what I'm interested in learning about. And then what I think, you know, it needs good storytelling and it needs clear storytelling. And sometimes I don't always find that. So I'm trying to help all of the other incredible journalists that are on the health reporting beat sort of fill that need. Um, and the reason that I wanted to do it was exactly that. Like I love storytelling. And as much as I love fantasy, I think there is nothing more captivating and more important than the truth. And it's just something that we can't like nothing made up is ever as good, in my opinion. So I knew I wanted to pursue writing, and when I kind of knew that I was leaning more towards nonfiction, um, I didn't initially know what kind of form that would take.
And
I was
when
like,
is
am I
this? Can
gonna,
you kind of give us like a timeline through this?
oh yeah, That's a good question. I don't know. I guess, I mean, it's always something that's been in the back of my head because I love to read. So naturally, like a lot of the adults in my life were like, oh, so you're gonna go be a writer. I think it wasn't until I started reading really good nonfiction that I was like, oh, this is cool. And my undergrad, so I went to UC Irvine for my undergrad, and they have a literary journalism major. It's the only one in the country. And they kind of describe it as creative nonfiction, which it confuses people, and rightfully so. I don't think it's necessarily the best description, but it's essentially long form nonfiction that's novelistic. So the big example is like In Cold Blood by Truman Capote,
Mm.
which, as you can tell by my
Yeah,
face, I
it's
just
sour.
so many issues with that book. I hate that that's kind of what people think of. Um, but like good examples of literary nonfiction would be like a lot of the long form stuff that comes from the Atlantic and New Yorker and sort of those like sort of more magazine writing. Um, so anyways, so once I started reading that and kind of knowing what that was, I became a literary journalism major in addition to being an English major. And then I really get into like news writing because of my school newspaper. I joined the school newspaper my freshman year. And so I just was interested in storytelling. And I think I feel very lucky that um, I've always had people in my life who've placed a lot of value in good writing. And, sometimes that doesn't always happen. Like people think, oh, humanities, who cares? Um, so, so yeah, so I had people who placed a lot of like value in good writing and, you know, um, I guess made me feel like it was a talent to be a good writer, which I think that was like an important thing for me to kind of internalize before I decided that I wanted to actually do that for a career. And I just felt
Wait, just to be
like
clear, internalize what?
that being a good writer is like actually a talent.
Okay.
And so there was
Is
just so
wait, so
many
hold on.
things
Now that I heard you say that, so I heard you say being a good writer is a good talent. Is that what you said? Being
is just a talent.
is a talent. Okay. Okay. Is something to
Yeah.
is a skill. Okay.
Yeah. I don't think I had thought of it as a skill. And I
Interesting.
certainly didn't think it was a skill I possessed until I started working for the school newspaper and finding that my stories were getting traction. And then I was like, oh, wait, maybe I can do this. And all of this is to say that I don't think that journalism is an exclusive career path at all. I think anyone can be a journalist. I think it just takes a lot of time to kind of be interested in honing the craft of writing and communicating, because I think that's one of the hardest things to do. Um, so yeah, there was a lot of things. I mean, like I said, I'm Lebanese. So when 9/11 happened, I was very young. And obviously, I had sort of a picture of what Middle Eastern culture was. And it was my mom always cooking and my dad, you know, teaching me about, like the olive trees that grow in our backyard and why that's important. And the significance of figs and like like just stuff like that. Like I had a very imprinted impression of what Middle Eastern culture, my cousins, my aunts, my uncles, they're all Middle Eastern, they're all from Lebanon. I know what that is. Then 9/11 happened, and what I was seeing was something very different and something I'd never seen before, and something that I was like, I don't get it. Like, how are you guys associating one with the other? And so that was kind of my first, I guess, inkling, and I didn't realize it at the time, where I was like, man, I wish I could just communicate to people and communicate well and in a powerful way that will make them listen what I see that's so different than what's on the TV or what, pundits are talking about. So I guess I knew that there was a need for that. I just never really like I didn't really think of that until I got older.
Hmm. And
Um,
maybe did you do identify with it that this could be me communicating?
no, not at the time.
Okay.
Definitely not at the time. No. But I wanted to do that for other people for sure. Like, I think I always felt like, you know, the first step was being like, okay, this is a skill and this is a talent and this is something I can learn to do and be good at. And if I can learn to be good at it, then maybe I should tell stories of people who feel like they, I mean, it's like giving power to the voiceless, which is like a very used trope in journalism, but it's well intentioned, which is like, if you have, and this is what I mean about journalism not being exclusive, it's like anyone can call and ask the questions I'm asking. I'm just making it my living. That doesn't make me special. That doesn't make me more skilled. But I do think that once you focus all of your energy on doing this thing, you do get better at it. And it does become a skill. So all that is to say, that was kind of an all over the place
No, it's
answer,
fine.
but all of that is to say, um, I think college was really when that solidified. It started with just being like, okay, being a good writer is something that is achievable. It's a talent, it's a skill, and it's worth something. And so, okay, well, if that's that's what I'm trying to reach, what do I do with it? And journalism just seemed like the answer for me.
How do you know when you're a good writer?
Um, I think I think when you can condense everything that you've learned for a story and deliver it in a concise and sort of um, like, I don't know, easy or digestible way, then I think you've reached your goal. I mean, my goal is not to be like Tolkien at all. I'm not trying to build worlds or create fantasies or anything like that. That is a whole skill that I do not have that so many people do. For me, what being a good writer is like, okay, if I'm going to spend 6 weeks reporting on farm worker vaccinations, I have to tell that in a very limited amount of words in a way that's clear, that's fair, that's accurate. Um, and if I can just get people to understand the story, like I'm happy. I think that's good writing.
How did you?
Um,
Yeah, now you mentioned this. Your most recent story. Um, how did you make sure? Well, one, if you could give us some background on the story you just wrote for Cal Matters, and then how did you make those decisions for, based on what you just said? And while you said that, I'll find the article.
oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I did a story for Cal Matters, which I had been working on for a really long time and was having so much trouble with because understandably, nobody has an obligation to talk to journalists. And more often than that, they don't want to, which is totally understandable. But I felt like it was an important story to tell. And I had to build a lot of trust with a lot of people to make them feel comfortable that I was a good person to tell that story to. And so it took a really long time. And at one point, I put it on the back burner because I was just like, I'm not getting anywhere. I keep getting, put in circles. But essentially, the story is about farm worker vaccinations. And California is a very agriculture heavy state, especially the Central Valley and a bit south in Riverside County and even San Diego County. There's a lot of agriculture in California. And so, obviously, farm workers who are essential were prioritized early on by the state as people that they identified needed to get the vaccine. And um, due to supply issues, as well as a state sort of recommendation that instead of following the initial tier system of like healthcare workers, then teachers and farm workers, and just like general agriculture between grocery store workers, they sort of changed course a little bit and decided, okay, well, we're going to open it up to anyone 65 plus. And so in a lot of counties, growers or employers of farm workers felt that this pushed them back in line. And farm workers themselves felt a little pushed back in line because there was this like initial myth that, in certain ethnic communities, there was like a vaccine hesitancy, which turned out not to be super accurate. Like there were a lot of farm workers who were very eager to get vaccinated because they were getting sick and their jobs required them to be in very close contact with people all of the time. So there was this desire, there was obviously a need, and then due to like shifting state eligibility requirements, it did delay a lot of farm workers getting vaccinated. So the story itself talks about two different ways that that was sort of negotiated. In Monterey County, an organization paired up with a federally qualified health clinic, which meant they get funding from the federal government to apply for a federal direct line of doses. So they were able to sort of circumvent the state and the county to get doses and just vaccinate exclusively farm workers. And we're pretty successful at doing so thus far. And then in Riverside County, a lot of the growers did they didn't go the federal direct route. They just really put pressure on their local officials to really commit to getting farm workers vaccinated. And so all of this reporting was done based on public record requests. So that's where a lot of my reporting comes from. I send out public record requests. I kind of try to focus them as much as possible, depending on the topic. And then based on those records, which are usually correspondence between health officials through the Documenting COVID-19 project, which I also freelance for, I saw the emails and they're mentioned in the article, which kind of tipped me off to what was going on. And then it just went fairly quickly after that, pursuing the story.
Why is this story important?
I mean, I think it's important because it just, it's one of those things where it's like everyone was in a difficult situation. State was in a difficult situation. The counties were in a difficult situation. Growers were in difficult situations. But regardless, like people were dying. And so, yes, it was difficult. Yes, there were supply issues. But our systems are not set up to handle this sort of issue. Like they're not set up to handle a pandemic. They're not set up to handle mass vaccinations in this way. And so I think it's an important story because God forbid something like this happens again. Hopefully a record of what happened and how it happened will inform better decision making in the future.
Yeah, my follow-up question to that is, who is this story for?
I mean, I hope that farm workers at least feel like heard. I hope that they feel like, the story was translated into Spanish, thankfully. And so I hope that they feel like, somebody is listening or trying to figure out what happened and why it happened this way. But I think mostly the story, again, is just an attempt at recording what happened. And so whoever is going to be in a position of power to make different decisions next time will hopefully see, and again, I'm not trying to make it sound like my article's like gonna change the world or something like that. I just mean, I hope it's one of many things that are considered going forward. So I guess people in positions of power, decision-making positions.
I'm just gonna pull it up quickly. I have it here on stream, so folks can see. The story's on, like I said, Cal Matters, called "How Growers Had to Sidestep County and State Programs to Vaccinate Farm Workers." You see here, it's quite a long piece too, and your comment about it being in Spanish, I think is brilliant. It's like accessibility to these things. You can check it out in the link in chat, everyone, if you're interested. Obviously, of course, have some more questions for Caitlin. You can address them here. I also want to talk about or hear your insights into how you approach reporting on the community of folks with disabilities. Maybe kind of sensitivities or awareness you take, how reporting might be different or the same in these cases.
Yeah, I mean, I try to approach all of my reporting fairly excuse me, fairly the same, because I don't think it does anyone like, I don't think it helps anyone to like tiptoe around stuff.
Hmm.
So obviously I'm like a conscious person of, whatever the situation is, but in terms of like my actual reporting, I try to approach everything, no matter what the story is or the topic is or the person. I just try to approach it all the same.
Which is how?
um with an open mind. I mean, I think that's one thing that I'm very grateful for in grad school, because I went to grad school for journalism, is like they really drilled home the point that like you never know, like you may think you know what you're going to get in an interview, but you never really know what somebody's story is. And I used to kind of not believe that, to be honest. I used to think like, okay, if you've done all this reporting and you've done your due diligence, when you go to confront somebody, like you know what they're going to say. And I just have found that that's not true at all.
Can you give
And
us
I
an
think that that's
example of that, maybe?
no, not exactly. Like I
Okay.
don't have a good like specific instance. I just mean like, you know, when I email somebody like, "Hey, I've been hearing a lot about this. Can I hear about your experience?" I used to phrase it differently. I used to phrase it like, "Hey, I've been hearing a lot about this. Is the same going on for you? Can I talk to you?" And then I realized that some people would be like, "No, it's not the same. So I'm not helpful to your article. So
Mm.
there's no point in talking to you." And then I was like, "Wait, I'm so dumb. Like I am like excluding so many experiences because I'm like tunnel visioning on what I think is the story." So yeah, so now I just phrase it as like, I just want to hear your experience. This is kind of what I've been hearing, but like, let me know what you've experienced. And a lot of times I think it'll, be good or be bad. And sometimes it's the middle, and sometimes it's neither. And sometimes it's all sorts of different things.
Hmm.
So, yeah,
Back about
I don't remember.
disability. It was like how the disability or
Right.
reporting
Yeah.
on issues faced by folks with, and I'll say this for myself too, is, the issues that face folks with disabilities are the same issues that also
Right.
affect folks without disabilities. It's just that in certain cases, because of the inaccessibility of systems, um, or just the ableism that's often systematized in a lot of these spaces, is what causes the issues. Just maybe throwing my 2 cents.
Yeah. No, but I mean, that's exactly why I don't approach it differently. Um, I mean, I was very involved, like from high school. I was involved with this organization called Best Buddies, which is like a really great, I think it's global, definitely national, but I think it's global organization. And their motto is like, we hope to one day not exist, because we
Mm.
hope that there will be equal employment opportunities. We hope that there won't be housing discrimination. We hope that, you know, there won't be this othering of people living with disabilities. And so in that club, basically what they do is they were just like a club on campus, and you would, once or twice a week go like kind of merge the special education group with the general ed students
Yeah.
and like have lunch and just get to know them. But that, and it's like, even though they set aside this space for it, it's like, for me, it really was no different than hanging out with my friends. Like, but that was like an important realization to have, because it is set up in a way where it's like, oh, that's the special education kids. They were on like the end of the campus too. So like physically separated from
Yeah.
everyone else. And if it wasn't for that club, I may have continued to think like, okay, they're separate
That's where they
and
sit. Yeah.
can't really connect with them for whatever reason. And that's sort of their own world and we're in our world. And then I was like, oh, this is just having lunch with friends.
Yeah.
This isn't even having lunch with people with disabilities. This is just having lunch with friends. And so, yeah, I mean, that's just my
Yeah.
attitude towards when I'm reporting. It's like, I'm not reporting on people with disabilities. I'm just reporting a story that I find important. Um, and of course there are like their own set of challenges. But again, I don't think that it's like, I mean, every sort of type of reporting has its own challenges. I don't think there's something that can like specifically be pinpointed
Yeah,
because
to the
reporting
topic.
them.
Are you familiar with the phrase inspiration porn?
Yeah, I am.
It's. I mean, I first heard it through disability rights activist Stella Young. She did a TED talk on what is called inspiration porn, and maybe
Yeah.
just describe it to folks. It's the stories that you hear of the robotics team comes together and builds the student with a disability a wheelchair, and the problem is that this is both othering and objectifying the person with a disability as the source of inspiration for the reader, right? It was, wow, look at this great thing that they did for this student. And yet, let me rephrase the way the story should be told is robotics is Medicare services are so inept that a robotics team has to build a chair for a student in need, right? Like the need was so clear that the robotics team had to build one, quote, build one, right? And what we're not looking at is the source of the problem, right? What we're showcasing is oftentimes how people, quote, sometimes without a disability have come to the rescue to folks with disabilities, right? And it totally skirts around the fact that what is the true problem here, right? Is like when it's always that kind of case. But how do you understand this kind of reporting, and maybe how do you try to avoid that?
I mean, I think there is a place for that kind of reporting. Like, I think, you know, everything aside, if this robotics team wants to take this on, like, that's cool. I don't know if it's like newsworthy, but it's cool. And there is a place for it. Like, if I'm already reporting in this school or, whatever, and like this story comes up, I think there is a place for it. But yeah, I mean, I definitely think the framing is half the battle with these types of stories, and framing something like that, it just is such a disservice, and it's really like skirting around the uncomfortable issue, which
Yeah.
is like this kid needed
Questions
somebody to
nobody
build
is
that.
asking.
Right. So I think for me, and this is something like, we went to a solutions journalism um seminar
Yeah,
with
yeah.
the Social Solutions Journalism Network. And that course I think is free online, so anyone that wants to watch it can watch it. But
You want to just before you say that, just share maybe why solutions journalism or what solutions journalism is, how you understand it.
yeah, yeah. So I think in that, what would seem like a solution, like, oh, these kids built this robotics, like, is not actually solutions journalism, because one, it's glorifying people and not an issue, and then two, it's such a like extreme example, which I think journalism in general loves to find. I mean, we all try to find like this emblematic thing that's like the lead of the story, and it's like, what grabs people and whatever. But it's like, okay, that kid got whatever he needed from that group. What about the thousands of
Yeah.
others who have it? Like, where is that in this story? And it needs to have a place in this story. And it's not a sustainable solution. This robotics team cannot be responsible for building every kid in the country whatever it is that they need. Like, that's just not a sustainable thing. And so I think rethinking sort of what takes up space in our media, you know, again, I don't think that this story isn't important, and I don't think that it shouldn't be shared, because what they did is cool, and what they did help somebody. And there's always room for positive stories like that. However, like, I think we just need to be thinking about what kind of stories will push us forward, instead of giving ourselves a like pat on the
Yeah.
back
Yeah.
in the current
Yeah.
circumstances.
Yeah. I mean, I agree to the extent of showcasing um, people coming together to support someone, right, and elevating the good, right? It's considering, and I think we're saying the same thing. Is yeah, that, but it can't only be that, right? Like if we're going to talk about this issue, let's talk about the fact that this child needed a chair and it took this team to build it, right? It not be the only part of the story, and you only get a quote from the student and their parents to say, I love the team, right? Not that that happened, but it's
Yeah.
considering, well, what is the real problem here that we maybe try to highlight? That is a solution, and my understanding of the solution journalism is maybe what you're sharing is focusing on systemic solutions to some of these issues, but using maybe anecdotal evidence or an anecdotal experience to kind of frame the narrative, but support it with research of like, okay, another team, let's just say, there's the company out there that has provides chairs to or provides accommodations for students that do need it, right? And that they exist to maybe fill in some of these issues. But yeah, it's just always one of those things that, like, once become aware of it, that's how I see a lot of this reporting, and it's one of these things that I really learned from a few of these disability rights activists and talking about like how you can remove that othering, right? Is like it's visibility in these spaces, right? Is like folks with disabilities don't have access or the ability to participate sometimes because of the inaccessibility system. So folks don't see them in these spaces. So it's not typical to see your teacher with a disability, or it's maybe not a nurse that's helping you, or clerk. It's very specific, maybe perspectives that you have, right? And what I really learned from this is that as someone who doesn't identify with the community, I have to be very sensitive and aware of how I'm positioning folks and who I'm giving or what am I giving attention to and where I'm positioning folks in this. It's not as the like annoying advocate. It's the person that is asking for something and then pointing your resources at the folks that are accountable, right? Is like, who is to blame for this? And that is where the issue is, not with the person that can't access the spaces that they want to. Just one of those things that's incredibly frustrating.
Yeah. And I think also something that oftentimes is like forgotten about. Well, I don't know if maybe that's too harsh to say, but I think something that we could do better at as journalists is looking to speak with self-advocates, like not just going to giant organizations who represent people with disabilities. And some of them do have people in leadership who have disabilities, but like people with disabilities aren't incapable of having a conversation, just like you, like for my story, like I really wanted to speak with a farm worker, which didn't end up happening, but it was something that I was thinking about and something I was actively trying to pursue. But sometimes I feel like that doesn't necessarily happen. Like even in conversations with editors, they're like, okay, let's look for an advocate.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I was like, wait, why am I looking for an advocate for any other story? I would be looking for the person of this specific group. And so, yeah, I mean, obviously some people don't feel comfortable, or maybe it's just difficult for them to hear over the phone or speak over the phone. Maybe you have to adjust your methods a little bit. Like I remember texting basically a whole interview with somebody with disabilities because they just didn't want to do it over the phone, and they felt like it was just going to be hard to get their point across. So like you do have to kind of adjust your method, but there are so many self-advocates who are more than happy to talk about it, and they're not like first on people's roster. So I think that's another thing that will help also the solutions aspect. Like when we're trying to do
Yes,
journalism that's geared towards solutions, it's like asking the people directly who are either benefiting or being hurt by something. They're going to be the ones that are like, okay, I have to live with this, and this is how I've done that. And maybe that can be, explored on a more wide scale level or whatever it is.
It's just
But
so
yeah, I mean,
like,
I think
yeah.
that's something that I know I have an issue with, where that's not always my first thought. And it's like making a conscious effort of any time that I'm doing a story on that beat is like making sure I can be like, okay, do you have a self-advocate in your organization who feels that they can talk to me about this issue? And just being conscious about that.
Yeah, representation in this space. And it just sounds so like the fact that we're talking about it in this way, like, oh, you have to find someone that's involved in the issue to hear about their experience. Like, what? Like, it's a challenge. Like, and I think you brought up a beautiful point in the challenge is not for them to be heard. It's for you to listen, right? It's I have to modify my approach of listening, not you come to me, right? I have to come to you holistically and understand that, as we often say in the work that we do at the city, is like, you're the one with the experience, right? You're the one with the lived experience that can tell me what works for you and what doesn't. It might not mean that it works for somebody else, but that I want to know what works for you, right? And I think that self-advocate comment is brilliant, and especially when it comes to students with disabilities, right? It's oftentimes the parent is the advocate, right? And they have an assumption of what they believe their child needs, and oftentimes they have a perspective that the child doesn't, because it's the parent's perspective, right? But you need both, right? You need this understanding of like, well, what does this child have to say? And the way it makes it into the story is its own, your own decision. But on hearing that from them is it's like it sounds like a no-brainer, right? But the fact that we have to talk about this in this way, like, no, get the people to represent themselves and then share that, because then who are you reaching? Like, who is this for then, right? Like, what is this for? Like, who are you trying to reach? I actually want to take this moment maybe to shift over some questions. I did have one question in the chat earlier from when we were talking about reading, but I just want to open it now to folks that are maybe still watching. If they want to ask any kind of questions, maybe now is the time. But the first question that we got earlier was from the 10th Lord, and they asked, just curious, did you ever read the books by R.A. Salvatore? Are you familiar?
Oh, I know that name. Hold on. Why do I know that name?
Also, hat tip to Pinot Grigio, who said that I'm his inspiration porn.
Okay, well, the answer is no, but I do recognize that name, and I don't know why I recognize it.
Lord, let us know.
Yeah.
What book are you asking, Lord? Lord.
I mean, I'm looking on Wikipedia. It says he became interested in fantasy after reading The Lord of the Rings.
So we're in good company. He's a man of brilliance.
So I already feel like I would like whatever he wrote. But if there's a particular recommendation, I'm always down.
Shoot it to us.
I will say I've not been able to get into anything the way I have with Lord of the Rings. Terry Goodkind came very close with his Sword of Truth series. I did really enjoy that. But for the most part, there's nothing fantasy that has come close to Lord of the Rings. But if Salvatore can challenge that, I am more than happy to try.
We're going to get a link soon, it says. But in that time, I'm glad you brought it up. Another thing that I really wanted to do in these conversations is get people's recommendations, right? From folks in chat, but also, the folks I'm speaking to. So now maybe the time is there something that we should be watching, listening to, or reading?
Okay.
Take your time.
I know. I'm trying to think of something. Like, obviously, the thing that came to my mind was the thing that I just finished watching. So I don't know if that's like necessarily a good answer. Oh man, I gotta think about it. I mean, well, I'll tell you what I just finished watching that I really enjoyed was Netflix did a series on Formula One.
Oh yeah.
Okay, I am obsessed.
Yeah?
Oh my God, I'm obsessed. I never knew how dramatic Formula One was. Like,
it's brilliant.
I mean, I knew like the speeds, and I knew how much money, and well, actually, I don't even know if I really thought about how much money goes into it. But the drama between the teams and the drivers on like with the other person on their team, and like, oh man, that series is so good, and it's been a really good gateway. And last week, I woke up at 6 a.m. to watch the Portugal Grand Prix, and this Sunday is Spain, and so I'm gonna wake up and I'm gonna watch it.
Wait, hold on.
Really
who's your racer
committed.
then?
Okay, so I love Sebastian Vettel. I love him. I don't know why.
So
I love him. And I think he got so screwed over by Ferrari, but whatever. That's like a whole separate story. I'm also really happy for Lando Norris because I think he's done such an outstanding job at McLaren. And I hope he continues to do well and continues to challenge some of the top teams. I mean, Lewis Hamilton is Lewis Hamilton, most incredible driver.
Yeah. He's unnatural. He's not a real.
Yeah, I mean, I can't. Yeah, wait, what were you?
I was just gonna say, I don't know if you saw his interview with Larry David. Larry David show. Larry David, not Larry David. Yeah, Larry David. He was a talk show host, right? The guy with the big white beard now, right?
No, David Letterman.
David Letterman.
Larry
Thank you.
David
Larry
was in
David is
Seinfeld.
Curb Your Enthusiasm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So David Letterman. Yeah, he does an interview with David Letterman,
Oh,
Hamilton that is, and talks about his childhood. You know, his relationship with his father, who was his manager, and this guy's an absolute lunatic. But I just have to say that, like, you know, through my childhood, it was always, God damn it. Now, Fernando Alonso. I don't know if you ever liked him, but Fernando Alonso is my racer.
Yeah, I feel bad because I got into it when he wasn't at his like he's not at his prime right now. So everyone, like, even in the documentary series, they're always like, he's so amazing. But it's like I never got to see that. So I believe that he's amazing. I just like he's
Yeah,
not one
Fernando
of like
Alonso. He was there when it was like racing against. I mean, he was there at Renault, and it was him winning, and then all of a sudden, Vettel came in. That young, is it German, right? Young German smoke show.
Yeah, I think he's German or yeah.
And as well as the time, it was Kimi Räikkönen as well. I don't know if you're familiar with him. Kimi Räikkönen was an absolute beast. And then Lewis Hamilton came, just stole the show, just got everybody
he's amazing.
hot.
His brother's a driver as well, and he has cerebral palsy.
Oh yeah, yeah.
He's successful in his own right, which I think is like, imagine, like, I mean, I know his dad, this was like basically their lives, but like imagine having two successful sons in racing. Like that's just crazy. What are the odds?
Great, successful. It's like pinnacle of the sport, right? Too. It's like,
I know.
Formula One is
but yeah,
unreal.
I'm super into it.
That's a great recommendation.
I guess that's a recommendation. Is like that was a good gateway for me because I didn't know anything. It's funny because my dad really likes Formula One because in Lebanon they used to do Formula One races, or I don't know if it was Formula One or Formula Two, but they used to have races in Lebanon, and so he was always into racing. And then he like never really got into NASCAR when he came to the U.S. or IndyCar really.
Yeah.
But now that I'm into Formula One, we've been watching the races again together, and he's like super into it again.
That's so funny. I didn't know this about you, of course, right? Like this is surprising. Formula One's great. My father.
I know. I mean, I've always been
a
sports. Yeah, I've always been a sports person. Like I love basketball. Basketball and tennis are like my two main things that I like very closely follow. Never knew anything about Formula One, and then I love sports documentaries. I love sports documentaries so much. And yeah, so I decided to just watch this one day on Netflix, and I like binged it, and now I'm super invested. Like I've already watched the highlights of the practices today, and yeah, I'm really like super into it.
It's a great, and for folks that aren't familiar with Formula One, it's the skill necessary to drive these vehicles at the speed in which they do is like, I forget what it was, and they said it maybe in the documentary, but you literally will lose pounds of weight because of how much strength you need to prevent the G forces from breaking your body, right? Like these guys are in seats that are customized to them because you can't have anything that kind of reduces drag or increases drag. Like the science that goes behind these vehicles that can literally be picked up by two people, and the speed in which they move and stop is unfucking believable. And these guys are lunatics. Like they go in and they're like this, literally sometimes like this. And the cars are made of like fiberglass, right? Like these are not, there's nothing stopping you from being, and you know, unfortunately, you know, Senna, which is a very famous Brazilian driver, one of the best in the world, is you know, died in a crash. And that's, you know, there's a great documentary about it as well. And you know, it's the same people that actually produced the Formula One series on Netflix produced or directed the Senna doc. And but yeah, someone said in chat, by the way, Greeter Dog, maybe opening a can of worms here, but he said, Kimi is a Finnish man, and as a Finnish man, he has gone through certain rites that are not suitable to be mentioned among children. I don't know what that is, or I'm unfamiliar and maybe questionable asking, but I guess to be explored afterwards. And just, you know, going back to the comments on Dritz before, it's the Legend of the Dritz book series. Um, I'll send you a link so you can see. I'll send you a link here on
I'll write it
on
down.
on Slack so you can see what I'm looking at. Um, yeah, this is the link that we're looking at, shared by Lord. Um,
Thank you.
as well as and see you later, Snap. Someone had also asked of Shadow and Bone. I don't know if you read the Shadow and Bone series.
I did because I knew the Netflix show was coming out, so I wanted to hop into that. I don't want to give any spoilers away, but I didn't love it, and I don't want to say why because I think that will give spoilers away.
Hmm.
And the Netflix show just came out, which I haven't seen yet. I started like the first 5 minutes, and then I think I got distracted. So I haven't seen the Netflix show at all. I did read the series, or yeah, it's a trilogy,
Yeah, it's a
right?
trilogy.
I
Yeah.
definitely read the first one. I think I read the second and third as well. Um, but there's a chance that I maybe didn't totally finish.
So I have a funny
But yeah,
story about that too.
I didn't love it.
Okay.
I don't want to say why just because it's relatively new, but yeah, I didn't love it, but it did its job, which is like I was engaged for
Yeah.
I don't know however long it took me to get through it. And I'm grateful for that. So
Yeah. Lord said he watched 5 minutes of it and he was out.
yeah, yeah, the first 5 minutes, I think I got distracted, which is usually not like the best sign.
Hmm.
But I am planning to watch it because I already kind of know what happens. So I figured like just, see how it matches up.
So
But
cool story there. Um, in my senior year of college, my undergrad, I lived in LA, and I worked for a production company. And what I was doing is script reading, right? Reading options, right? So what it is that producers get scripts. They decide if they want to purchase the script or the IP so they can develop in whatever way they want, right? And what landed on my desk? What was this Shadow and Bones series? Like, so
oh,
this manuscript was on my desk in 2014, and I really enjoyed reading it. Right, it was like it was from what I remember, it was a cast of characters that they each had their own specialties. Right, it was like the one was the bomber, one was the assassin, one was this. It was like the first of the series. Shadow and Bone is one of the later ones. This was called like something of thieves. I don't know. But anyway, I remember really reading and really enjoying it and making notes. And after I finished the book, told the producer, I was like, hey, I think you guys should do this. In the end, I checked and it wasn't the same production company, but it was just so funny to see it come up. I was like, wow, they actually made it in the end. It's become a real
yeah.
thing. So I thought it was
I remember
cool.
thinking like this, the reason I started reading it is because I knew this show would come out, and I was like, oh, this is kind of in my wheelhouse. Let me like get through the books so that I can like be excited about the
Hmm.
show. Um, and I think it lends itself very well to television, and I'm sure again, I haven't seen the show. I'm sure it's good. I know it's got Ben Barnes from like the only thing I
Oh
know
yeah,
him from.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Westworld.
not Chronicles of Nart. No, I was gonna say Chronicles of Nart, not
Oh
the
yeah, he's
first
Prince
one.
Caspian.
He was Prince Caspian, yeah, with
Yeah,
that
he is
terrible
hot.
accent.
Someone says he's hot in chat. He is hot.
He's a
Super
good
hot.
man. Yeah. Um, so yeah, I did have a little crush on him back in the day. And so when I saw that he played one of the characters, I was like, ooh. And then I just haven't watched it since.
Someone said he's also Jigsaw and Punisher. You watched the Punisher?
No.
Let me see. I need
It's
to
a Marvel thing, right?
think so.
Or
Yeah, the
no?
series. Um,
No, I haven't
so
seen it.
Lord also gives us TLDR on Dritz's. He says it's basically a story about a dude in a fantasy world, the world of Dungeons and Dragons. Very immersive experience.
Ooh,
Um,
cool. I'm excited. I'm always looking for new stuff, so thank you.
yeah. Um, is there anything else that you want folks to? It's also recommendations, but also shameless plugs. If you want us, you got 9 people here.
I mean, I already talked about my stories. I think I've plugged enough. But because this is a recommendation I gave to you, I'll give it to everyone. Khalil Gibran, the
Mm,
best. That's all I'll say. If you want to read some
here, hold on.
beautiful writing, Khalil Gibran is the pride and joy of Lebanon. and it's because he is incredible. So highly, highly, highly recommend.
Yeah, Caitlin
And
recommended this story to me, and I picked it up, and I almost had one of these profound moments where, like, in reading it, he dispels such dense wisdom in so few words. And maybe I'll read a few lines that I really enjoy in a moment. But like, Caitlin, I know I've said this to you a few times, but like, it was one of those moments where, like, in reading these words and really being impacted by what he had to say, I was like so grateful that you commented on my wallpaper. It was one of those things that you don't really know how life's going to turn out, right? Like, here's this, peer of mine that just happened to share this thing, and take, I don't say a risk, because hopefully it's not feel that way with me, but it's like, you took a risk in sharing something that you liked. And because of that, I got to these words, right? Like, and if you hadn't said that, if I hadn't changed my wallpaper to Rivendell and just hadn't seen, like, we might not have built this friendship, right? Maybe at one point I would have showcased or made a bunch of Lord of the Rings references, and that would have been your in otherwise. But brings me to say that, like, it's so incredible how impactful small gestures like that can be. And just to kind of maybe share a few words from Gibran, there's one that there's one in particular. So the story, can you briefly describe what the prophet is about?
I kind of don't want to give people
Okay.
like I kind of want people to go in cold because you
Okay.
did, right? I don't
Yes.
did I tell you what it was about or
No.
did I just tell you to go in? Okay, so I'm going to give the same advice then to everyone else who's interested. I would say just go in with no idea.
Okay.
I mean, the prophet kind of gives you maybe a clue, but I would just say go in cold and just experience it.
Okay. How about this? Why don't I maybe end this conversation with what he says about friendship?
Do
Okay.
it.
So in the scene that I'm talking about, he's sharing. Someone asks him to speak about friendship and his thoughts on friendship, or the protagonist in the story. And they say, "Let me come to a good. Let me see." Okay, he says, I'll just read what he has to say here. And a youth said, "Speak to us of friendship." And he answered, saying, "Your friend is your needs answered. He is your field which you sow with love and reap with thanksgiving. And he is your board and your fireside. For you come to him with your hunger, and you seek him for peace. When your friend speaks with his mind, you fear not the nay in your own mind, nor do you withhold the a. And when he is silent, your heart ceases not to listen to his heart. For without words, in friendship, all thoughts, all desires, all expectations are born and shared, with joy that is unclaimed. When you part from your friend, you grieve not. For that which you love most in him may be clearer in his absence, as the mountain to the climber is clearer from the plain. And let there be no purpose in friendship save the deepening of the spirit. For love that seeks aught but the disclosure of its own mystery is not love, but a net cast forth, and only the unprofitable is caught. And let your best be for your friend. And if he must know the ebb of your tide, let him know its flow also. For what is your friend that you should seek him with hours to kill? Seek him always with hours to live. For it is his to fill your need and not your emptiness. And in the sweetness of friendship, let there be laughter and sharing of pleasures. For in the dew of little things, the heart finds its morning and its refresher. Yo, it's so good. That line, that one there, when he says, for what is your friend that you should seek him with hours to kill? Seek him always with hours to live. I thought that was so brilliant. And Sofioso, yes, you're in the church of Khalil Gibran. It's one that I would attend frequently. It's so good. And there's way more deeper wisdom. And I think the words are so dense with meaning. Just really impacted me. And I was so grateful, Caitlin, that you made this recommendation, and that you now, I can share these things with you and continue to share these things with you, and now learn a little bit more about your insights into Comic-Con. into, you know, your approach to journalism and, you know, as well as your love of friendship. So thank you so much. And thank you for coming on the
Thank
show.
you for having me. Thank you. This was the best, and I'm sure your other guests have said it, but you have such a talent for this, and thank you for creating this space.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's real that, you know, I've shared with you these thoughts before making the show, and you were a real support. You know, like I really think you could do this, and it was meant a lot because I was like, you know, we only spoke so often. She was like, no, I think you can do this, and the confidence was real. So righteously,
Yeah,
thank you
it
so
wasn't
much.
misplaced. I was proven right.
Nice. All right. So otherwise, you know, I'll speak to you soon, and thanks for coming on.
All right. Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye.